So you're kind of assuming that believes the same things that the American founders believed.
No.
No?
I'm assuming they're going to learn those
They're
things
going to
again.
learn those things? Okay.
You know, the big, as you know, because you work with me, I keep returning to the fact that virtually the whole American population and the whole world has been raised in schools that are owned or controlled by government agencies. And the whole world population has been taught to see government as some kind of god that can solve all their problems. And what's going on in this economic catastrophe that we're in now, I call it the great economic calamity, is that the whole world is starting to learn that they were lied to in their government-controlled schools. It just doesn't work. And you know, we are headed for a situation where I think that the typical individual, it's just going to dawn on him one day that he was propagandized from the time he was 5 years old to believe in something that isn't so, which is the might and majesty of government.
Yeah. What do you think that will be? What do you think that point will be when society realizes that the federal government is a giant Ponzi scheme?
I think, you know, for millions of people, I think it's already begun. I was reading a research report this morning. The Pew Research Center did a poll back in May about the political beliefs of Americans. And man, since Obama was elected, I mean, in the space of like 4 months after Obama was elected, confidence in the federal government has just plunged. And there's this tremendous movement in the direction of the original American philosophy, which some people call classical liberalism and other people call libertarianism. But essentially, it's a minarchist viewpoint. The government should be very, very small. It should be very much on the fringes of our lives. You should almost never see the government anyplace. And the whole country is slowly moving back to that original American philosophy, that political power corrupts the morals and the judgment. How can you possibly have lived through the last 12 months and not come to the conclusion that political power corrupts the morals and the judgment and nobody can be trusted with it?
Right. Well, I think my next point was just the moral depravity of the whole situation, where one generation thinks they can rob the food out of the mouth of the next generation before they're even born.
You know, what can I say? I get back to my old point about all of us being raised in government-controlled schools and being propagandized from the time we're 5 years old. And incidentally, I'm not blaming this on the teachers. I used to be a teacher. The teachers were raised in those schools too. They're teaching what they think is true. I would suspect that after this last year, not so many of them think it's true anymore. But as far as the horrible, unethical nature of this whole thing, yeah. And again, you know, there is this tendency I've detected among some young people to blame us old codgers for it.
Well, you did vote for it.
I did.
Not you.
I didn't.
Not you.
I didn't. No way. But yeah, and, you know, and there are an awful lot of old people who will tell you, I knew there was something wrong with this. I knew it couldn't go on forever. I knew it had to fall apart. But again, you know, they were never equipped to understand what was really going on. And I remember, this is a good point. I remember back almost 30 years ago talking to my aunt, and she was so outraged. And her comment was that back in the 30s, when all of this was, all these welfare programs and everything were being hatched, that they were promised that their kids would never be burdened with this. And she was so angry at Franklin Roosevelt and all sorts of other public figures that they had lied and that the kids were going to be burdened with this. And again, you know, she was raised in government-controlled schools. She did not have the ability to understand the hoax.
Right.
But she, by that time, had figured out that her generation had just been lied to, and that their kids really were going to be hit by this horrible burden. And she was really angry. And I've met enough people my age and older to know an awful lot of them are really angry.
Yeah, I would not want to be an old person in today's day and age, because you have all these kids that were raised in state-controlled schools that are either amoral or immoral, and they're looking at grandma and angry that they're having to support her and 20 other grandmas.
You know, good point you make. I don't think I've ever said this in public before, but for their own protection, the older people had better get out in front of this. And they better be some of the people who are leading the protests.
Yeah.
So that the young can see that it's not, it doesn't have to be a battle between old and young. That there are a lot of the old people that feel just as bad about this as anybody else does.
Yeah.
And that they're on the side of the young and they care about the young. That's the most important thing, is the old people have got to say they care about the situation that the young are in.
Yeah. It's just appalling to me, thinking of, you know, the child pops out of the womb and grandma hands them the yoke and says, start pulling.
Yeah, right.
You have $500,000 in debt to start working off.
Right, right. And there are millions of older people who don't know that is what the case actually is.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I say we're up against some years of really hard times here.
Yeah.
There is going to be an upheaval that's going to be tremendous. And again, I really think that people who are my age and older had better get out in front of this so they don't wind up being blamed for the whole thing. Because most of them are good people who just did not understand what they were really voting for.
I think next episode we were going to touch on
the dollar, as I remember.
The dollar,
yeah,
destruction of the dollar.
Right. And we were talking earlier, this subject of, you know, the impoverishment of the young really ties directly into the future of the U.S. dollar, which, you know, the dollar's been going downhill ever since the beginning of the war, and it's probably going to continue. And this situation that we talked about today is going to make it a lot worse. So I think that's a good next subject to get into, and we will do that in our next session.